My wife said we're happy without you, so I quietly forwarded a message that changed everything. Welcome to our amazing viewers at Betrayal Chronicles. Your presence makes these stories worth sharing. We'd love to hear which part of the world you're joining us from. Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. Dean Seth had always believed that success was measured in the quiet moments, the Sunday mornings when his wife Fiona would bring him coffee in bed, the evenings when their daughter Lily would fall asleep between them during movie nights, the satisfied exhaustion after closing another multi-million-dollar deal at his consulting firm. At 42, Dean had built everything he dreamed of as a kid growing up in his grandmother's cramped apartment. The sprawling house in Westfield with its manicured lawn and 3-car garage, the private school tuition that ensured Lily would never want for opportunities, the joint bank account that never dipped below 6 figures, even after Viana's shopping trips and spa weekends. He'd worked 80-hour weeks for 15 years to build this life. Missed birthday parties and school plays, taken red-eye flights and worked through vacations. But it had all been worth it when Viana would smile at him across the dinner table and say, "I'm so proud of what you've built for us." The irony wasn't lost on him that success had become his prison. The more successful he became, the more clients demanded his attention. The more money he made, the more expensive Viana's tastes became. The bigger their house got, the emptier it felt when he was the only one in it. But Dean had convinced himself this was temporary. One more promotion, one more big deal, one more year of grinding, and then he'd scale back. Spend more time with Lily before she grew up completely. Reconnect with Viana. Travel together instead of him traveling alone to client sites. That dream died on a Tuesday morning in March. Dean was in his home office at 6 a.m. preparing for a presentation that could net his firm a $50 million contract. Coffee growing cold, spreadsheets filling his monitor, the kind of focused intensity that had made him the youngest partner in his firm's history. Viana's laptop chimed from the Kitseth counter. She'd left it open again, something that usually annoyed him because of the security implications. This time, the notification preview made his blood freeze. James Morrison. Can't wait to see you tonight. Hotel room is booked. Make sure Dean is working late again. Dean stared at the message for 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes. Then he walked to the Kitseth and read it again. Then he sat down at Viana's laptop and scrolled through the conversation history. What he found destroyed 15 years of marriage in 15 minutes of reading. 6 months of messages, detailed plans for meetups while he was traveling, discussions about how to manage their situation without disrupting the lifestyle, photos he wished he could unsee, and worst of all, conversations about Lily. Viana. Dean will be in Chicago all week. We could take Lily to that new place in the city. She keeps asking about your kids. James. She's going to love having siblings. Can't wait for us to be a real family. Viana. Soon, I just need to figure out the timing. Dean provides so well for us. Need to make sure everything is protected. James. Your lawyer friend still thinks we can get 70% if we play it right? Viana. More if we can prove he's an absent father. The work hours, the travel, it's all documented. Dean sat in his Kitseth, surrounded by the life he'd built, and realized he'd been funding his own betrayal. Every business trip had been an opportunity for Viana to play house with James Morrison. Every late night at the office had been used as evidence of his abandonment of his family. Every dollar he'd earned had been calculated into Viana's exit strategy. His phone buzzed. A text from Viana. Working late again tonight, don't wait up. Lily has soccer practice at 4. Can you pick her up? Oh wait, you have that client dinner. I'll ask my sister. The casual manipulation was breathtaking. Viana knew he had a client dinner because she'd looked at his calendar. She'd scheduled her hotel rendezvous, knowing he'd be unavailable for Lily. Then she'd text him as if she was doing him a favor by handling the pickup. Dean forwarded James Morrison's message to his phone. Then he forwarded the entire conversation thread. Then he spent 2 hours documenting everything: screenshots, timestamps, contact information. His business mind took over, treating this like any other hostile takeover he'd navigated for clients. Know your opponent, understand their strategy, identify their weaknesses, strike where they're most vulnerable. Viana's weakness was that she'd assumed Dean was too busy, too trusting, or too comfortable to pay attention. She'd been planning her exit while enjoying his income. She'd been calculating how to take his daughter while enjoying his devotion. She'd been wrong about all of it. Dean closed Viana's laptop and went back to his office. He had a presentation to finish and a marriage to end. But unlike Viana, he was going to do it properly. Dean Seth had spent 15 years as a management consultant, which meant he knew how to research targets, analyze weaknesses, and develop strategies for corporate warfare. Now he was going to apply those skills to his personal life. James Morrison was Viana's mistake. She should have chosen someone less visible, less connected, less married. A simple LinkedIn search revealed that James Morrison was a real estate developer, married to Patricia Morrison for 12 years, father of 2 children ages 8 and 10. He ran Morrison Properties, a mid-sized firm specializing in luxury residential developments. His company website featured family photos: James with his arm around Patricia at charity galas, their children at company picnics, the picture of suburban success. Morrison Properties had been struggling. Dean found the public financial filings, the delayed project announcements, the subtle signs of a company extending itself too far in a tightening market. James Morrison was leveraging his lifestyle to maintain appearances while his business hemorrhaged money. That explained Viana's appeal. She represented success, stability, the kind of connected lifestyle that could open doors for a man whose own doors were quietly closing. Dean spent his lunch break parked outside Morrison Properties. James Morrison was exactly what he'd expected: mid-40s, expensive suit that was slightly too young for him, BMW sedan that was probably leased. The kind of confidence that came from lying to everyone, including himself. At 2 p.m., Dean called Morrison Properties from a blocked number. "This is James Morrison." "Mr. Morrison, this is Dean Seth. I think we need to have a conversation about my wife." The silence stretched long enough that Dean wondered if the call had dropped. "I don't know what you're talking about. Hotel room bookings under your company credit card. Text messages discussing my daughter's custody arrangements. Plans to be a real family while you're married to Patricia and I'm funding your lifestyle." Dean let that sink in. "What do you want?" James's voice had lost all pretense. "I want to meet. Today. 5 p.m. The coffee shop on Main Street across from the courthouse. Come alone." "I can't." "You can, and you will. Because the alternative is Patricia Morrison receiving the same message thread you've been sending my wife, along with documentation of every hotel charge, every lunch meeting, and every time you've used my family as your personal fantasy." Dean ended the call and went back to work. His 3 p.m. client meeting went perfectly. His 4 p.m. conference call closed a deal that had been stalled for weeks. Amazing how clearly he could think when he finally understood exactly what he was fighting for. At 4:45, Dean sat in the coffee shop and watched James Morrison pace back and forth outside for 10 minutes before finally entering. The man looked like he'd aged 5 years since their phone conversation. "This is insane," James said, sliding into the booth across from Dean. "We're adults. These things happen." "Do they?" Dean pulled out his phone and showed James a screenshot of the text messages. "Adults planning to steal custody of my daughter while I fund their affair?" James's face went white. "Viana said you were getting divorced anyway. She said it was amicable, that you'd agreed to shared custody." "Viana said a lot of things. She told you I was an absent father who worked too much. She told you I was emotionally unavailable. She told you that I'd already agreed to let another man help raise my daughter." Dean leaned forward. What she didn't tell you was that I've been recording our conversations for months because I suspected something was wrong, or that I have access to all our joint financial accounts and can see every hotel charge, every restaurant meal, every purchase you've influenced. This is harassment. This is information gathering. You're a real estate developer, James. You understand due diligence. Dean pulled out a folder and spread documents across the table. Morrison Properties is 3 months behind on office rent. Your personal credit cards are maxed out. You've borrowed against your house twice in the past year. James stared at the financial documents like they were written in a foreign language. How did you? The same way I found out about your other problem. You were investigated by the state licensing board 2 years ago for misrepresenting property conditions to buyers. The complaint was dismissed, but the investigation file is public record. Dean watched James process the implications. My wife thinks she's trading up from a workaholic husband to a successful real estate developer. She doesn't know she's actually trading down to a man who's been lying about his financial situation to maintain appearances. Vianna and we care about each other. Vianna cares about financial security. When she finds out you're broke, when she realizes you can't actually provide the lifestyle she's planning, when she understands that leaving me means losing the income that funds her entire existence. Dean shrugged. Well, that's when you'll learn exactly how much Vianna actually cares about you. James was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. What do you want? I want you to end it. Tonight. Complete cutoff. No contact. No explanation. No discussion. Ghost her. I can't just... You can, and you will. Because if you don't, Patricia Morrison gets all of this tomorrow morning. Your business partners get copies of the hotel charges you've been running through your company account. Your children get to explain to their friends why Daddy was in the newspaper for having an affair while his business was failing. Dean stood up, leaving the financial documents on the table. You have 24 hours to cut off all contact with my wife. After that, your problem becomes Patricia's problem, and my problem becomes Vianna's problem. As Dean walked toward the door, James called after him. What are you going to do about Vianna? Dean turned back with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm going to teach her the difference between being supported and being managed. That evening, Dean sat in his home office and watched Vianna get ready for her night out with girlfriends. She spent an hour on her makeup, chose her most expensive dress, and sprayed herself with the perfume he'd bought her for their anniversary. Don't wait up, she called as she headed for the door. We're going to that new place downtown. Could be late. Have fun, Dean replied, not looking up from his laptop. At 9 p.m., his phone buzzed with a text from Vianna. Girls' night is amazing. So good to decompress. See you tomorrow. At 9:03 p.m., his phone buzzed with a text from James Morrison. It's over. Don't contact me again. Dean smiled and went back to work. Vianna was about to discover that her safety net had disappeared and she didn't even know she was falling yet. Vianna came home at 2 a.m. with mascara smudged and her story already falling apart. The restaurant was so crowded, she said, kicking off her heels in the hallway. We ended up at that little wine bar on 5th Street. You know how Lisa gets when she's had too much to drink. Dean looked up from his laptop, where he'd been working on client proposals and watching Vianna's location ping from the Marriott downtown until 1:30 a.m. Sounds like fun. Did you take any pictures? Vianna froze for just a moment. You know I hate photos when I'm drinking. Makes me look bloated. Right, well, I'm glad you had a good time. Vianna studied his face, looking for signs of suspicion or accusation. Dean had perfected his poker face during 15 years of client negotiations. She saw nothing. Over the next 3 days, Dean watched his wife slowly fall apart. It started with the obsessive phone checking. Vianna had always been attached to her device, but now she was checking it every 30 seconds, her face cycling through confusion, frustration, and growing panic. Everything okay? Dean asked over breakfast Thursday morning. Fine, just some drama with the girls. You know how it is. By Friday evening, Viana was pacing the house, calling numbers that went straight to voicemail, sending texts that obviously weren't being returned. "I think I'm getting a cold," she announced. "I'm going to bed early." Dean found her in their bedroom at 10 p.m., sitting on the edge of the bed with her phone in her hands, looking like someone had died. "Viana, what's wrong?" She looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Nothing. I'm fine. Just tired." But she wasn't fine. Dean could see it in the way she picked at her food, the way she stared out windows without seeing anything, the way she kept checking her phone even though it never rang anymore. Saturday morning, Viana announced she was going to the mall to clear her head. She was gone for 6 hours and came home with no shopping bags and no explanation. Sunday, she barely left her room. Monday morning, Dean found her crying in the kitseth. "Viana, what's happening? You've been different all week." "I told you I'm getting sick." "This isn't sick. This is something else." Viana looked at him with an expression he'd never seen before, desperate, cornered, like an animal realizing the trap had already sprung. "Dean, do you ever think about what would happen if our marriage didn't work out?" The question hung in the air between them. Dean set down his coffee cup and turned to face his wife completely. "Are you asking for a divorce, Viana?" "No, I mean, I don't know, we're so different now. You work all the time. I feel like we're strangers living in the same house. And you think divorce would solve that?" Viana's hands were shaking. "Maybe we'd both be happier. Maybe Lily would be better off with parents who aren't constantly stressed about money and work and..." "We're not stressed about money, Viana. We have plenty of money. But you're never here to enjoy it. You're always working, always traveling, always focused on the next deal. When's the last time we went on vacation together? When's the last time we had dinner without you checking your phone?" Dean listened to his wife recite complaints that sounded rehearsed. Grievances that had been workshopped with someone else. Justifications for decisions she'd already made. "So, what are you suggesting?" Maybe we try a separation. Just temporarily. To see if we can figure out what we both really want." "And custody of Lily?" "We'd share custody. 50-50. I think that would be healthier for her anyway." Dean nodded slowly. "Have you talked to a lawyer about this?" Viana's face flushed. I asked my friend Jennifer some questions. She went through a divorce last year." "And what did Jennifer tell you?" "Just that California is a community property state, that assets get divided equally, that courts prefer shared custody arrangements." Dean felt the last piece of the puzzle click into place. Viana hadn't just been planning to leave him for James Morrison. She'd been planning to take half of everything he'd built while maintaining shared custody of Lily. She'd been calculating how to destroy their marriage while maximizing her financial benefit. "Viana, I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth." His wife went very still. "Is there someone else?" The silence stretched between them like a canyon. Viana's face cycled through confusion, panic, and something that looked like relief. "Dean, because if you've been seeing someone else while we've been married, while I've been working to support our family, while I've been trying to be the husband and father you said you wanted, then we need to have a very different conversation." Viana's phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it automatically, then looked away quickly, but not before Dean saw her face crumble. The message preview was visible from where he stood. Number, not in service. Viana had been trying to contact James Morrison all week. She'd been texting a disconnected phone, calling a number that no longer existed, waiting for responses from a man who'd ghosted her completely. "Who were you expecting to hear from, Viana?" "Nobody. It's just spam." Dean picked up her phone and handed it to her. "Check your messages." "Dean, Check your messages." Viana's hands were shaking as she unlocked her phone. Dean watched her scroll through days of undelivered texts, unanswered calls, messages that had never been read. "Viana, who is James Morrison?" She looked up at him with the expression of someone who'd just realized they'd been playing chess while their opponent was playing a completely different game. How do you know that name? The same way I know about the hotel room bookings. The same way I know about your conversations with Jennifer about asset division. The same way I know you've been planning this exit strategy while spending my money and living in my house. Fiona sank into a Kitseth chair. Dean, I can explain. You can explain how you've been having an affair for 6 months while planning to divorce me and take half of everything I've worked for. It's not like that. You can explain how you've been using my daughter as leverage in conversations with your boyfriend about your future family. He loves Lily. He loves the idea of a ready-made family funded by my income, just like you love the idea of financial security without the husband who provides it. Dean sat down across from his wife and pulled out his phone. James Morrison ghosted you because I told him to. I showed him documentation of your affair and explained what would happen to his marriage and his failing business if he didn't disappear from your life. Fiona stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. You destroyed his life? I protected my family from a man who was helping my wife plan to destroy our marriage while stealing custody of my daughter. James isn't like that. He's a good man. He loves me. James Morrison is broke, Fiona. His business is failing. He's behind on his rent and his credit cards are maxed out. He was using you to maintain a lifestyle he can't afford while planning to use my income to support his fantasy of playing house with my wife and daughter. Dean showed her the financial documents he'd compiled. Your successful real estate developer is actually a failed businessman who was investigated for fraud and is currently 3 months behind on his office rent. Fiona looked at the paperwork like it was written in a foreign language. That's not... He told me about his projects, his investments. He told you what you wanted to hear because you represented financial security he doesn't have. The Kitseth was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of Fiona's world collapsing. So what happens now? She whispered. Dean looked at his wife, the woman he'd loved for 15 years, the mother of his daughter, the person he'd trusted with everything he'd built and felt nothing but cold clarity. Now you're going to learn the difference between being married to someone and being financially dependent on them. Dean spent that Monday evening in his home office, not working on client projects, but drafting what he privately called the Fiona Situation Strategic Plan. 15 years of consulting had taught him that successful outcomes required clear objectives, defined timelines, and measurable results. His objectives were simple: maintain custody of Lily, protect his assets, and ensure Fiona understood the consequences of her choices. The timeline was immediate. The results would be permanent. At 7 a.m. Tuesday, Fiona was still in bed when Dean knocked on their bedroom door. We need to talk. Living room, 5 minutes. Fiona appeared in her robe, looking like she hadn't slept. Dean, about yesterday. Sit down. Dean had arranged documents on the coffee table like he was presenting to a client. Fiona's face went white when she saw the bank statements, hotel receipts, and text message printouts. This is 6 months of evidence documenting your affair with James Morrison. Hotel charges, restaurant meals, gifts purchased with our joint credit card for a man who isn't your husband. Fiona reached for one of the documents, but Dean pulled it back. This is not a negotiation, Fiona. This is information delivery. You're going to listen, and then you're going to make some decisions about your immediate future. He pulled out a second folder. These are Lily's school records, medical records, and activity schedules. For the past 6 months, while you've been conducting your affair, I've been the parent handling 73% of school events, 89% of medical appointments, and 100% of parent-teacher conferences. That's not fair. You know I work. You work 3 days a week as a part-time marketing coordinator making $42,000 a year. I work 60 hours a week making $340,000 a year. The difference is that my job actually requires the hours. Yours is a hobby funded by my income. Dean opened a third folder. These are our joint financial records. In the past 6 months, you've spent $23,000 on personal expenses, spa treatments, shopping trips, dinners at restaurants where you've met James Morrison, hotel rooms where you've conducted your affair. I contribute to this household. You contribute $42,000 to a household that costs $180,000 annually to maintain. Your entire salary doesn't cover the property taxes on this house. Fiona was crying now, but Dean had seen his wife cry to get out of consequences before. This time, her tears weren't going to work. Fiona, here's what's going to happen. You have 2 choices. He placed a document on the table. Option 1, you sign a post-nuptial agreement acknowledging your infidelity, waiving any claim to spousal support and agreeing to a 70-30 custody split in my favor. In exchange, I don't file for divorce based on adultery, and you keep your current lifestyle while we work on our marriage. Fiona stared at the document like it was written in poison. Option 2, I file for divorce tomorrow with full documentation of your affair, your plans to use Lily as leverage in your custody arrangement, and your systematic deception over the past 6 months. California may be a community property state, but adultery cases with this level of documentation tend to go very differently than amicable divorces. You can't prove. Dean pulled out his phone and played a recording. Fiona's voice filled the room. We could take Lily to that new place in the city. She keeps asking about your kids. Soon. I just need to figure out the timing. Dean provides so well for us. Need to make sure everything is protected. Fiona's face went completely white. You recorded my calls? I recorded your calls after I discovered your affair. In California, that's legal as long as one party consents. I consented to recording my own conversations with my wife. This is entrapment. This is evidence collection. You discussed using our daughter as a negotiating tool in your divorce strategy. You planned to portray me as an absent father while knowing I was working to provide for our family. You conspired with your affair partner to maximize your financial gain from ending our marriage. Dean leaned forward. Fiona, I want to be very clear about something. I am not the same man who trusted you completely 6 months ago. That man would have been devastated by your betrayal. He would have been hurt and confused and willing to negotiate. He paused, letting the words sink in. I am not that man anymore. I am a man who has spent 6 months watching his wife systematically betray everything he worked for while planning to steal his daughter and his assets. I am a man who has had time to plan, to investigate, and to decide exactly how this situation is going to be resolved. Fiona was shaking now. What do you want from me? I want you to understand that your choices have consequences. You chose to have an affair. You chose to involve Lily in your exit strategy. You chose to plan your divorce while spending my money on hotel rooms with another man. Dean stood up. Now you get to choose how those consequences play out. Sign the postnup, and we try to rebuild our marriage with clear boundaries and accountability. Or refuse to sign it and discover exactly what happens when you try to divorce a man who has 6 months of documentation about your systematic betrayal. And if I choose option 1, then you end all contact with James Morrison, you submit to periodic phone and computer monitoring, and you participate in marriage counseling with a therapist I select. You also take over 100% of Lily's school and activity responsibilities, since you'll need to prove you can prioritize our daughter over your personal entertainment. That's not fair. Fiona, you spent 6 months planning to destroy our marriage while I funded your lifestyle. Fair is not part of this conversation anymore. Dean picked up the documents. You have 24 hours to decide. After that, I make the decision for you. As he walked toward the door, Fiona called after him. Dean, I do love you. The thing with James, it was just, I felt so lonely. You're always working, always distracted. I needed someone who made me feel important. Dean turned back to look at his wife. Fiona, if you had felt lonely, if you had felt neglected, If you had wanted more attention from your husband, you could have talked to me. You could have asked me to work less. You could have suggested counseling or date nights or any of 100 ways to reconnect with the man who spent 15 years providing for your family. He paused. Instead, you chose to have an affair, plan a divorce, and use our daughter as leverage in your financial negotiations. Those aren't the actions of a lonely wife. Those are the actions of someone who decided to replace her husband while keeping his income. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You kept James Morrison interested by promising him a ready-made family and financial security. You kept me working and earning while you planned your exit strategy. You scheduled your affair around my business travel and used my absence as justification for your betrayal. Dean opened the door to leave, then turned back one more time. Vianna, the difference between a mistake and a choice is planning. Mistakes happen in moments. Choices happen over months. You made choices. Now you get to live with the consequences. That evening, Dean sat in his daughter's room while she did homework. Lily was 12 years old, smart enough to sense tension in the house, but young enough to trust that her parents would handle whatever was wrong. "Dad, are you and Mom okay? She's been acting weird lately." Dean looked at his daughter, his greatest achievement, the reason he'd worked so hard for so many years and made a decision that would shape the rest of their lives. "Lily, sometimes adults make mistakes that affect their families. Your mom and I are working through some problems right now." "Are you getting divorced?" The question hit Dean like a physical blow. "I don't know yet, sweetheart. But I want you to understand something very important. No matter what happens between your mom and me, you are the most important thing in my life. I will always protect you and take care of you." Lily nodded solemnly. "I know, Dad. You always take care of everything." That night, Dean lay awake wondering if he was making the right choices. Vianna had betrayed their marriage, but she was still Lily's mother. Was he being too harsh? Was he letting anger drive decisions that would affect his daughter's entire childhood? Then he remembered the recordings. Vianna discussing Lily like she was a negotiating asset, planning to use their daughter's loyalty to manipulate custody arrangements, treating their child like a chess piece in her financial strategy. No, he wasn't being too harsh. He was protecting his daughter from a mother who had proven she would sacrifice Lily's stability for her own desires. Some betrayals were too calculating to forgive. Some choices were too deliberate to excuse. Vianna had made her choices. Now Dean was making his. To be continued. In next part. Thank you for reading. My wife said we're happy without you. So I quietly forwarded a message that changed everything. This story explores themes of betrayal, accountability, and the complex process of rebuilding trust after devastating choices. Sometimes the most important victories are not about winning, but about protecting what matters most. If this story resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments. Which character's perspective did you find most compelling?